So about a year ago, I did a reread of the graphic novel From Hell about Jack the Ripper, and I did a reread with my friend Alan over at the channel Big Hard Books and Classics. And in the process of that, I think that was the time when I asked him, because we have a lot of writers that we admire, a lot of overlap. So I asked him, are there any writers that what writer do you recommend that I don't know, that I haven't read? And I remember one of the writers he recommended was Clarice Lispector, who I'd never read. And so it's taken me almost a year, but I finally have gotten around to reading one of her books, a very short book called The Hour of the Star. And she originally wrote it in Portuguese. And because I've studied Italian and Spanish, and I've kind of studied some Portuguese, but not at the level of my Italian or Spanish, I thought maybe I would be able to, at one point, read her in the original. But this time I decided to read her in English translation. And yeah, it's about 96 pages. And then afterward, I tried to read it in Portuguese. And I am reading in Portuguese, but I'm not understanding it as much as I should. So maybe in the future I can read her in the original. But for now, I really only know her through the English translation of this short book, which was about 100 pages or so. And it's a very interesting book. I don't know if it's a book for everybody. Definitely not. I mean, a lot of the authors I read are not authors that everybody can enjoy. Well, they can enjoy if they want to, but I think a lot of people don't have the patience for James Joyce, Thomas Pynchon, William Faulkner, and things like that. But if you're on this channel, if you found my channel through literature, maybe this author will interest you. I have a tendency, I think, to compare authors to other authors rather than describing them as they are. And as I was kind of thinking about this book and her style, at least in this book, I haven't read anything else by her, but how she writes, I was thinking this is the comparison I came up with. And I don't know if it makes any sense or if it has any validity, but I was thinking it's like Franz Kafka, William Burroughs, and Virginia Woolf mixed as one author, which I don't know if that even makes sense. Is that's possible? And I guess kind of what I mean by that is with Franz Kafka, I mentioned him recently because I had read this book that Robert Crumb illustrated with this other author about Franz Kafka, kind of an introduction to Kafka. But in that review, I just mentioned that I had read Kafka before when I was younger, and I didn't really appreciate him. And I thought a lot of the things that I was looking for in books at the time, I found like he was kind of professionally lacking in some sense, that he didn't provide what I wanted or expected in a piece of literature. So for that, I kind of discarded him at some point. And but I've kind of thought about him, and recently I was considering reading him again. He's kind of another author that, kind of like with Clarice Lispector, I'd prefer to read in the original German, but my German is like my Portuguese, not good enough. So who knows? But anyways, that is kind of what I see with Clarice Lispector, is that there's this almost mistake on my part, or some hypothetical ideal reader, that this isn't professional writing, or that this is amateurish and not really doing what writing is supposed to be doing. And I think, though, that the more you're exposed to conventional narrative style and structure and what is traditionally taught in literature classes, that you look for the themes, the elements of literature and stuff, the more you kind of the more you see it over and over, the more you kind of get sick of it and you want something new. So I think this is something new, and for that I appreciated it. And so that's kind of the Kafka element. And then the Burroughs element is sort of in her, and this I could be wrong about because I was reading her in translation, but the way her sentences work, there's this kind of jerkiness in William Burroughs, that the way his sentences fit together is like, because he used cut-ups and a lot of things where you just take two sentences and mash them together, and they didn't always flow like you expect a sentence to do in in like a Charles Dickens novel, for example, or something. But that's kind of interesting because it makes the language work in new ways. So I think I kind of see that, at least in the translation of the English, and I kind of can appreciate it in the Portuguese too. But the afterword of this edition that I have was talking about how if you're thinking that that's just the English translation, it's not. It's also in the Portuguese. So apparently, she was kind of an unconventional stylist. And then finally, Virginia Woolf. I think the Virginia Woolf aspect is just this really intense interiorization of ideas and self-analysis and analysis of everything that's going on in hyper detail is what I see there. And I haven't read Virginia Woolf in a while though, but she's another author that I'd like to go back and read more by, because I've really only read her two novels, To the Lighthouse and Orlando. Orlando is one of my favorite novels, but yeah, anyways. So yeah, back to this book. So like the first half of this about 100-page book is, and I'm going to avoid spoilers, but the first half is very, I was like wondering, this is kind of something that I've talked about. Mark Lehner, one of my other favorite authors. He has this very kind of almost Kabbalistic style in which he analyzes everything, and he analyzes the analysis and goes over it over and over. And like you're wondering, is the actual story even going to happen? There's something kind of like that going on in this book, because almost the first half of this book, there's not much happening. It's just this author who you kind of have to remind yourself isn't Clarice Lispector, because it's supposed to be a man writing, and it's kind of but she, as the author, is kind of messing with your head. Like, how much is this fiction? How much is this just is this based on true events, or is this something the author's making up as they go along? Like, you're kind of like not sure, and it's very, like I said, the part about the author being a man is also very slippery, and sometimes you forget it, and it's just there's a lot of tricks going on, and I think it's more polished and more work goes into it than appears on the surface. It seems, like I said, very amateurish, but I think there's a lot going on underneath it that I appreciate. And then the second half, let me say a few things about the characters, actually, because the characters, there's only like 4 or 5 characters, I think. And even though they don't say much and they don't do much, I have very clear image in my head of the characters. They're very kind of down to earth, almost like I was thinking of Harvey Pekar, his comics, the way that the characters are just so blue collar and non-exceptional and non-remarkable. So I was kind of seeing that, and yet I still do remember the characters very vividly, and they had unusual names, or at least to my ear. And I don't know, like they're all the characters are kind of likable and unlikable in the same moment. So they were very unique characters, and they stuck with me in a different way. And when I finished the book, I was like, but then I was a few days later, I went back and started reading in the Portuguese, and I was like kind of interested in it even more. And I wish I could understand it better, because there's just still a lot. I think my Portuguese, I probably understand maybe 50 or 60% at best, which is not really a satisfying reading experience. So I can recommend this book, but not for everybody. It's a very unique voice in writing, and I want to read more by her, certainly. I think Alan recommended also this collection of short stories, and I haven't read that. So maybe in like 6 months, if I keep studying Portuguese, I'll come back to her and try maybe reading parallel English and Portuguese again and see how that works, because I think she is a pretty interesting discovery. I think I have a tendency to read less women authors. Like it's not like I don't want to. It's just like, I don't know. Like usually I don't connect to them and feel that their voice is, I don't know, as engaging. But there are, like I said, women authors that I do admire a lot. George Eliot, Virginia Woolf. I'm trying to think who else would be like my top tier female authors. I know there's other out there, but I think I would say those two are my favorites at this point: Virginia Woolf and George Eliot. George Eliot that was her pen name. If you don't know, I forget what her actual real name was, but yeah, she wrote under a male name. Anyways, Yeah, so if you've read anything by Clarice Lispector, let me know what you think and what else you recommend. Um, I don't know what else I have to add, I guess, at this point. But I did enjoy the book, and it was not what I expected. It has this feeling of being made up as it goes along, but it also feels like the author knows exactly what she's doing and is very in control of the narrative. But it's a very surprising book, like in that you can, similar to, like I mentioned, Mark Lehner, who I feel like on the next page you could be anywhere in the entire universe. Like that's kind of what is going on with this book. Not to that extreme level, but in a sense that anything is possible. So yeah, I'll check her out again in the future.